Clementine Dawson bolted upright before sunrise, the soft glow of dawn barely touching the horizon. Her father's ranch lay silent in the pre-dawn hush. Fields of parched rye, a weather-worn barn, and the lowing of a restless herd. But Clementine had no time for idle moments. From the corner of her room came the most urgent sound of all, squeals of panic. Downstairs, she found Petunia, the family's prized sow, her pink flank gleaming with dew, bolting through the corral gate and tearing toward the open prairie. Clementine's heart pounded. Without that pig, the Dawsons would lose their best chance at selling fresh pork at market, and with the ranch teetering on the brink of debt, every head of livestock counted. "Petunia, wait!" she called, dropping her shawl and racing after the runaway. Her boots kicked up clods of earth as she sprinted across the dew-damp pasture, lungs burning in the cold air. The pig barreled past the windmill, splintering dry grass against its trotters, then veered toward the tangled brush lining the creek. Clementine skidded to a halt at the edge of the thicket. Through the brambles, she glimpsed a shape, someone crouching low, as if hiding. Petunia squealed and lunged forward, but the figure vanished behind a gnarled mesquite. Curiosity and fear tangled in her chest. She pressed through the thorny branches, ignoring the scratch of thorns across her dress. The pig raced on, but Clementine's focus shifted. Whoever, or whatever, was out here had drawn her into the wild beyond the fences she'd known all her life. Ahead, at the creek's bank, Petunia paused to drink. Clementine approached quietly, eyes scanning the opposite bank. There, half hidden by reeds and shadows, she saw the stranger, a dusty, silver-haired man, bronze-skinned and raggedly dressed, gripping a battered rifle. His eyes met hers for a heartbeat, surprised, wary, then guarded. Clementine's pulse thundered. This man wasn't a cattle rustler or one of the land agents her father despised. He looked as stranded as her family and just as desperate. Petunia, unconcerned by human faces, snuffled at the water's edge. Clementine realized the moment had come. Go back and pretend she'd seen nothing, or step forward, risking everything to uncover who this stranger truly was, and why he'd chosen her family's land to hide. She swallowed the knot of fear in her throat and took a hesitant step into the creek's knee-deep water. "Sir?" she called, voice steady despite her trembling heart. "What are you doing on our property?" The stranger's rifle lowered by inches. The ranch gates lay miles behind them, but here, where ranching land met untamed territory, a single word, courage, could change the fate of everyone who called this place home. The stranger's calloused hand loosened on the rifle's stock as he rose from the reeds. Water dripped from his broad-brimmed hat and the faded leather of his coat. Clementine's boots squished in the cool creek as she waded closer, eyes never leaving the man's weathered face. "My name's Silas Hart," he said, voice rough like gravel. I reckon I'm trespassing." He nodded toward the distant barn. "Your family's land looked quiet enough." Clementine forced her fear down. "Why are you hiding here?" Silas glanced apprehensively over his shoulder as though expecting pursuit. He drew a leather map from inside his coat, its edges tattered, ink faded, and held it out tentatively. "I've been tracking a seam of silver for years. First saw the reflections in your creek bed at sunset." She peered at the map. Crude sketches of ridges, the Dawson homestead marked with an X, and a jagged line labeled "Silver Lode." Her heart pounded. Silver could be worth more than cattle or crops ever dreamed. "My pa's land," she said, voice barely above a whisper. My ma and pa own this ranch." Silas dipped his head. "I know. I watched your pa struggle to keep the place. I thought if I found enough silver below I could help him save the ranch, if he'd let me share in the find." Clementine's mind whirled. She thought of her father's furrowed brow at every creditor's letter, of her mother's sleepless nights tallying the books. Silver, real, shimmering silver, could lift their debts overnight. But sharing the secret meant forcing her family into danger. Greedy claim jumpers, unscrupulous land agents, or worse. Silas folded the map carefully. "You don't have to decide now," he said, "but time's short. Spring thaws the banks, and the creek will wash away the traces. If you're willing, meet me here at sunset. I've got the tools to dig a test shaft." Clementine backed out of the creek, the cold seeping through her skirts. "I'll think on it," she replied, voice trembling. As she climbed the bank, Petunia snorted and nuzzled her hand. Clementine knelt to stroke the pig's bristly coat. Downstream, Silas gathered his gear and slipped away into the willows, leaving her alone with the heavy promise of his secret. Returning to the barnyard, Clementine found her father stacking hay. Sunlight glinted off the rake in his hand. She swallowed hard. "Pa," she said, there's a man by the creek. He says there's silver under our land." Her father froze, eyes narrowing. "Silver? On our ground?" Clementine nodded, heart pounding. "He showed me a map. He wants to dig a test." Her father's jaw clenched. "We've worked this land for 20 years. Never once did we see rock like that." He turned away, face shadowed. "I'll pray there's truth in it, Clem. But if there's silver, we'll need to be careful. This land is all we have." Clementine met his gaze, determination flaring. "I'll go back at sunset," she promised. "I'll see if his secret can save us." And so, as the day wore on, the Dawson Ranch held its breath, its future now resting on one girl's courage to unearth the unknown, hidden beneath the very soil that had sustained her family for generations. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon in streaks of rose and gold, Clementine crept back toward the creek. She carried Silas's toolkit, tucked in an old burlap sack, a short pickaxe, a hand shovel, and a battered tin lantern. Heart pounding, she found him waiting in the willows, his silhouette dark against the fading light. Silas greeted her with a cautious nod. "You brought the lantern." Clementine touched the smooth handle. "I didn't trust the dusk without it." He smiled thinly. "Smart girl." Together they crossed the creek and climbed the grassy bank where Silas had marked the spot with a small cairn of stones. He knelt by the ground, brushing away loose dirt. "Here," he said, pointing at a faint seam of pale rock veined with quartz. "That's the silver lode." Clementine knelt beside him. In the lantern's glow, she saw the glimmer of metallic flecks. Her breath caught. Silas handed her the pickaxe. "Want to take the first swing?" Swallowing her fear, Clementine gripped the handle and lifted it. The cool metal bit into the earth with a dull crack. She swung again and again, loosening crumbly soil until she uncovered a fist-sized chunk of rock streaked with silver. Silas knelt and pried it free. He held the rock to the lantern light. "That Clementine Dawson," he murmured, "is worth more than a year's herd of cattle." She turned a stone in her hand, the silver glinting like moonlight. "It's real," she whispered. Joy and dread warred within her, relief at rescue from debt, terror at the power of such wealth. Silas stood and began digging deeper, extending the shaft until the walls displayed more veins of silver. Clementine shone the lantern over his shoulder, illuminating glints of ore in the fresh rock. Suddenly, the sharp crack of a rifle report split the air. Clementine froze, heart leaping. Silas dropped the pickaxe and bent low. "Someone's watched us," he hissed, eyes scanning the ridge. He grabbed Clementine's arm. "We need to cover this up, quick." They tossed soil and rubble back into the hole, heaped branches over the cairn, and snuffed the lantern. In near darkness, they sprinted back to the barn, hearts hammering. From the top of the hill, Clementine glimpsed a lone rider, a land agent's brand on his hat, coasting down the road toward the creek. He carried a rifle at his hip and a glinting badge in his coat. Silas pulled her into the shadow of the barn. "He saw the lantern. If he reports silver here—" His voice cracked. "They'll swarm this place." Clementine placed a steady hand on his arm. "We have to tell Pa." Silas met her eyes, understanding the danger and the trust she placed in him. "All right," he agreed, "but it must be tonight, under cover of dark." Together, they crept to the farmhouse door. Inside, her father sat by the hearth, reading the debt notice again. When Clementine burst in, cheeks flushed, she held out the silver-laced rock. "Pa," she gasped, "we found it. Silver, under our land." Her father's eyes widened as he took the stone. He ran rough fingers over its vein. "Merciful heaven," he murmured. He looked from the rock to his daughter's resolute face. "We'll talk strategy at first light, but for now, thank you, Clementine." As they prepared to hide Silas in the loft and plan their next move, the night settled around the Dawson ranch, with hope and fear intertwined, and the promise of silver casting long shadows beneath the western sky. In the cramped loft above the barn, Clementine eased Silas behind a stack of old feed sacks. The moonlight slanted through the small window, illuminating dust motes that danced like restless spirits. Below, her father and mother sat at the kitchen table, the silver-laced rock between them, a gleaming promise and a heavy burden all at once. Her mother, Mary Dawson, laid a gentle hand atop the stone. "If this is true, we can settle our debts, but only if we keep it out of the wrong hands." Her voice wavered. "Once word spreads, claim jumpers and land sharks will swarm our homestead faster than cattle thieves." Clementine's father, Jacob Dawson, clenched his jaw. "That land agent I saw, the man with the badge, he's already riding back to town. He'll tip off the assessor, the judge, every speculator in Carson County." He glanced at his daughter. "Clem, your courage saved us, but now we must be smart. We have two choices: stake a valid claim at the recorder's office come dawn, or hide the load and work it ourselves in secret." Silas cleared his throat from the shadows. "Claim-jumping laws favor those with capital. If we file, we'll need witnesses and funds to operate the mine. The Dawson name alone may not deter powerful interests." He sank onto a sack, exhaustion etched in his features. Mary exchanged a look with Jacob. She drew a deep breath. "We owe it to our family and to Silas for revealing this. We'll stake the claim at first light. Then we'll raise enough to keep the mine working honestly. Better to hold our heads high than to bury our future in secrecy." Clementine nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I'll ride with Pa into Ridgecrest at dawn. I know the claim office clerk from when I traded eggs there. I'll vouch for us." Jacob placed a rough hand on her shoulder. "You're braver than any man I know, Clem. We'll face this together." Silas emerged into the lantern's glow. "Then I'll stay to cover your backs here. I'll bury the tools again and ensure no one finds this shaft until you return." Mary rose and placed a thankful hand on Silas's arm. "We'll repay you. More than just a share of silver, Silas. You'll always be part of this family." As midnight settled over the Dawson ranch, plans were drawn and courage steeled. In the heart of the loft, Clementine lay awake, imagining the dawn ride and the claim she would stake. Below her, the silver lode waited, an untouched vein ready to reshape her family's destiny. If only they could navigate the lawmen, land agents, and greedy prospectors who would stop at nothing to seize it first. Before the sun had fully risen, Clementine and her father rode hard for Ridgecrest. The copper-hued morning light glinted off the silver chunk tied in her satchel. Her fingers brushed its cool edge as they cantered down the dusty trail, her heart pounding in time with the hooves. Ridgecrest's wooden sidewalks creaked beneath their boots as they entered town. A handful of early risers, storekeepers sweeping porches, the postmaster unlocking his door, paused to watch the pair. At the far end, the recorder's office stood with its registration sign freshly painted. Inside, Clerk Hawkins looked up from his ledger, spectacles perched on his nose. "Back so soon, Mr. Dawson?" he asked, recognizing Jacob's weather-dusted face. "You might have missed opening." Jacob set the silver rock on the counter. "No time to lose, Hawkins. We want to file a mining claim on Dawson Lode, here on Section 12 of Dry Creek Range." He pushed forward the deed and survey map Clementine had helped draw. Hawkins frowned as he flipped through his forms. "Silver, prosperous find. You'll need 2 witnesses to your survey and the filing fees." He paused, then nodded. "All in order, if your witnesses are present." Clementine swallowed. Before she could speak, the door burst open. Silas Hart strode in beside Deputy Land Agent Benson, who pushed a second survey map across the counter. "Sorry to trouble you," Benson said, voice clipped, "but I've received word of silver on the Dawson property. By right of discovery, I'm here to file claim on behalf of the Hidalgo Mining Company." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Not by right. You can't leapfrog an existing find without proof. We were first to stake." Benson's eyes flicked to Hawkins. "I'll gladly pay double the fees. Company policy." His gaze hardened. "File mine, then if Dawson wants to challenge, he can take it to court." Hawkins shifted uncomfortably. He looked to Clementine. "Miss Dawson, did you witness the discovery?" Clementine met his expectant gaze. She stepped forward, voice steady. "Yes, my pa and I found it at dusk. We can show you the exact spot in the buried test shaft." Benson scoffed. "We'll see." Jacob laid a rough hand on Clementine's shoulder. "Thank you, Clem." Hawkins sighed, stamping first the Dawson deed. "Filing complete, Dawson Lode, claim number 324. He flipped the stamp, and with a look at Benson's map, added, "Pending challenge." Benson hissed, but held his tongue as Hawkins filed Dawson's map ahead of Hidalgo's. Outside, Jacob wrapped Clementine in a proud embrace. "Now," Jacob said quietly, "we'll need those witnesses and Silas's testimony to hold our ground. Let's ride home." As they left the office, Clementine felt the weight of the silver in her satchel and the heavier burden of the battle to protect it. Behind them, Hidalgo's surveyors watched from the sidewalk, plotting their next move against the family who dared outpace a company's reach. Yet the Dawsons had their claim and each other to fight with. Back at the Dawson Ranch, Clementine and her father found Silas waiting by the barn, lantern in hand, and worry etched into his face. Two of their longtime neighbors, Bill Perkins and Sarah Green, stood nearby, summoned as witnesses to the discovery. "Evening," Bill greeted, tipping his hat. "Heard you'd filed first. Glad to stand by you, Jacob." Sarah nodded, clutching Clementine's satchel with the silver sample inside. "We saw the streams shine ourselves. No doubt it was the Dawsons who found it." Jacob clasped their hands in thanks. "With your testimony, the claim's ironclad, at least until Hidalgo Mining Company sues." Silas exhaled. "Then it's more than filing. You'll need to work the mine, or at least start a pit, before they can jump it." Clementine's eyes shone with determination. "Then at dawn, Silas and I will begin digging in secret. We'll leave no proof for them to steal." That night, as the full moon climbed over the ridges, Clementine crept back to the hidden shaft with Silas. She held the lantern while he raised the earth, revealing fresh veins of silver. With each swing, the promise of security and the threat of those eager to seize it drove them onward. But danger stirred beneath the shadows. Unseen by the pair, a wagon idled on the far ridge, lanterns slung outside its side. Figures leaned in whispers, rifles glinting. The Hidalgo surveyors and Benson's deputy agent had not forgotten their defeat in Ridgecrest. At dawn, Jacob and Clementine rode out again to retrieve tools and deepen the test shaft, but found fresh animal carcasses strung from the ranch gate as a warning. The tribal bobcat family, long allies of the Dawsons, recognized the sign of intimidation and dispatched their swift messenger riders through the canyons. Within hours, lush whistles caressed the north wind as tribal scouts circled the ranch, arms lowered but ready. At the same time, Bill Perkins and Sarah Green rallied frontier neighbors to stand beside Jacob and Clementine in the fields. Under the oak at the creek bend, the Dawson family met with Chief Running Bear of the Bobcat clan. He faced Jacob quietly. "Your land is safe while our peace stands. We will ride with you if the Hidalgo men return." Jacob swallowed, gratitude and resolve mingling. "Thank you, Chief. We stand together." Clementine pressed the bear token Silas had given her into Running Bear's hand. "A promise," she said. "We protect each other's families." As the sun rose high, silhouettes of bobcat riders and armed neighbors formed a protective ring around the Dawson claim. On the far ridge, the Hidalgo wagon stirred. Benson's deputies spurred their horses forward, rifles raised. But the Dawsons and their allies would not yield. In that dawn's light, Clementine realized the silver beneath their feet had done more than save a ranch. It had forged a frontier bond stronger than greed itself. And as the two sides faced off across the creek, one truth shone brighter than ore. Together, they could stand against any dark that threatened their home. The Hidalgo riders crested the ridge, rifles leveled at the Dawson ring, faces set in anticipation of bloodshed and profit. But as they descended toward the creek, they encountered Chief Running Bear's painted warriors flanking the Dawson neighbors. Smoke from a peace pipe curled between the lines, offered by Jacob Dawson himself. Deputy Benson lowered his rifle first, surprise and grudging respect in his eyes. He dismounted and approached Jacob, hands open. "I came for your claim," he said, voice uneasy, "but I see you've marshaled friends I can't ignore." Jacob nodded, extending a steady hand. "Land's more than ore and profit. It's life and honor. You've got your claim pending, but we protect what we found first." Benson glanced at his surveyors, who shifted beneath the bobcat banners. After a tense moment, he nodded once and spat into the dust. "You've got heart, Dawson. I'll drop Hidalgo's claim and recommend they respect your discovery." A cheer rose among the Dawson allies. Chief Running Bear exhaled and beckoned both sides to step forward. He lifted the peace pipe, took a ceremonial draw, then passed it along the Dawson line and back to the Hidalgo men. In the curl of cedar incense, enemies became uneasy allies. Silas Hart emerged from the barn loft, rifle slung, and bowed to both factions. "Now," he said, "let's work this claim and keep the peace we've earned." Over the next days, settlers, bobcat scouts, and even former Hidalgo hands toiled together. They cleared brush, framed a shaft house, and pounded timbers. The silver seam glimmered in the shaft walls, veins of hope threading through the dark earth. Clementine guided the children of both communities in carrying lanterns and water buckets, teaching them that unity, like silver, was forged under pressure, shining brightest when shared. By month's end, the Dawson mine produced its first bars of pure silver. Jacob secured enough to repay debts in full. Mary reinstated the ranch's credit, and Clementine placed a small ingot beneath the family's hearth, a symbol of new beginnings. At sunset, the entire frontier village gathered beneath the oak by the creek. Lanterns swung in the breeze as Jackson Cole raised his voice in a toast. "To the farmer's daughter, whose courage followed a pig and whose faith followed her heart." Clementine, cheeks flushed with pride, stepped forward and lifted her own mug. "To family, friendship, and the silver linings we find when we dare to seek them." As laughter and clinking mugs echoed under the western sky, one truth settled in every heart. The greatest treasure on the frontier was not silver in the rock, but the bonds of trust and kindness that turned strangers into neighbors and neighbors into family. Spring's thaw brought wild flowers and new life to the Dawson Ranch, but it was the gentle hum of the mine that now echoed through the valley. The Dawson mine, once a secret seam unearthed by a curious girl, had blossomed into a shared venture, fueling every homestead from Dry Creek to Ridgecrest. Under Clementine's watchful eye, the mine's profits funded school books for frontier children and irrigation ditches that tamed the sun-scorched fields. Ranchers swapped loaned silver for seed grain. The Bobcat tribe used their share to repair lodges and purchase cloth for winter clothes. Even the Hidalgo Mining Company, now a modest partner, kept its claim honest, reminded by Benson's word and the peace pipe ceremony at the creek. On a warm morning, years after the first test shaft, Clementine led a procession of children, settler and tribal, down the creek bank. Each child carried a small silver nugget tied in leather to plant beneath the great oak that had witnessed the first standoff. Together they buried the nuggets, crowns of new leaves rustling overhead like whispered blessings. At the oak's base, Clementine placed the original bear token, now worn smooth by decades of hands. She looked to her parents, Jacob and Mary, older now, but still standing tall beside Silas Hart, ever a friend and guide. Beyond them, Chief Running Bear and his people stood in regal rows, their painted faces alight with pride. Clementine raised her voice so all could hear, "May this oak and these silver seeds remind us that courage, once sparked, grows into hope that nourishes every heart. In the Wild West, Our true wealth lies not in ore or gold, but in the trust and kindness we forge together. As the children scattered silver into the soil, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves and carried their laughter across the meadow. Under that vast western sky, the Dawson legacy stood secure, a testament to a farmer's daughter whose morning chase led to a silver fortune, but whose greatest treasure was the community she united with a single act of courage and compassion.